Since 2008, the US has recklessly quadrupled the money supply, and the result is not just inflation, it's an entire generation getting battered by the financial system. Today's guest, Hasan Piker, is one of the biggest voices on the American left. He believes capitalism has failed young people, that greedy corporations and corrupt politicians are strangling their opportunities, and that government intervention is the only way to fix it. I see the root cause, and thus the solution set, very differently. And that's exactly why I wanted this conversation. In this episode, we go head-to-head on the real mechanics behind wealth inequality, why housing has become the make-or-break asset for the middle class, and whether socialism can actually deliver positive change in the messy reality of modern economics. Without further ado, I bring you Hasan Piker. Why do you think so many young people are turning towards socialism?
That's the first question you got
out
for
of the
me?
gate, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. It's because capitalism is failing them. It's failing everybody, not you and me. It's not failing either of us. We've done quite well for ourselves, but it has been a spectacular failure for the average person, and therefore people are understandably looking for alternatives. Young people in particular, especially those who are just coming out of college or they're just going into college, they look at the opportunities that they have, or rather they don't have, and they realize that the future is grim. So they look for an alternative that at the very least chooses to identify the problem and also solve it. Material inequalities, cost of living crisis, not being able to ever own a home. These are very real problems facing younger generations. And of course, they look to an alternative organization of the economy as one that is probably the best way to go forward.
So I'm always trying to map things in terms of where do I want to end up, and then what are the mechanistic steps that can lead you there. So if you were to say, what is the way from the mechanisms that capitalism has failed people? What are the features of the machine that makes it a sort of by nature flawed system?
At its base, at its core, it is this inherent contradiction, right? If you are someone who's working, someone who's a wage laborer, and I'm sure you've worked at a regular job in your past as well, most people want to work the least amount of time for the most amount of pay, right? Yep. And that doesn't mean like they're greedy or anything. It's just human nature. You want to work as little as you possibly can and get paid as much as you can for that job. On the other side, you have your people that own the businesses that want to obviously pay you the least amount that they can possibly pay you for the most amount of time to get you to work. So these two things, when broken down, Karl Marx says, is the inherent contradiction of class. You have the wage laborers on the one side and you have the bosses on the other side, or those who work for your capital owners on the other side. And that is the reason why there is so much tremendous wealth inequality, at least according to Karl Marx. I happen to agree with this assessment
hold on.
as well.
That I would get why. So you set that up as one side wants to work as little as possible, get paid as much as possible. The other side wants to pay as little as possible and get as much work as possible. But that doesn't, to me, explain the inequality. Because I think you and I are going to agree that wealth inequality is at a level that is literally tragic. Yeah. And I'll use the word dangerous.
Yeah.
Do you see an insufficiency in explaining why we have inequality and we need to push deeper? Or do you really think that mere human tendency for those positions to be the way they are explains wealth inequality?
The very fact that because the one side that wants to make sure that you work the most amount of hours for the least amount of pay is the side that gets to basically take home what we know as profits, which is what Marx describes as the surplus labor, your additional output, like what you do and how much money you generate for the company versus how much money the company pays you back in return. That creates a system of wealth inequality that is normalized. It's understandable. It's like we call it profit. We're like, this is my business. I started it. I got lucky, or I worked really hard and I get to reap the rewards of it. You don't. You're the worker. It makes sense. A lot of people buy into it. A lot of people like this system. But I think over time, that system fundamentally creates this inefficiency, as a matter of fact, where every industry wants to inevitably monopolize. Every industry wants horizontal and vertical expansion so they can be the domineering force in the market, set prices, and just like we see with Amazon, for example, start engaging in the process of increasing the prices that they initially had set so low, and that is how they justified basically eating up so many different competitors in the same sector. And I think we're at that point. This corporate consolidation that has taken place has created a system where there's only a couple companies that get to dictate prices through not price fixing, which is illegal, but through price leadership, right, which is very legal. Someone does this and then everybody else follows suit. That becomes much easier with the corporate consolidation that we're seeing. And that is precisely, I think, the reason why the system is like collapsing right now in a way that even someone like yourself, who in other circumstances I feel would be very defensive of these structures, is recognizing it. I have a couple friends who used to work for a libertarian think tank called Reason Magazine. And I remember having conversations with them where they would do these fundraisers. And apparently the rich people that funded the Reason libertarian think tank would call welfare riot tax. So they even understood that there was a level.
Is what we pay to avoid riots. Got it.
There's a level of like giving back that people need to do in order to make sure that people aren't so hungry that they recognize that they're being starved.
Okay,
that's fallen apart, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have a very different take on the fundamental flaw in the system that's creating the problem, but it's not capitalism per se, it's banking. And so when you start looking at, so you mentioned earlier.
I agree.
Yeah, the thing is like, it'll be interesting to see it play out in this conversation, but I really feel like anybody who's looking at the mechanistic reasons why we are where we are will just have a hard time saying, oh we agree on all of that. And so it just then becomes, as we build out, I think people break into camp one of, I'm going to speak to the way that people feel, and I'm going to give them policy prescriptions that are going to feel right. And then other people, or maybe I'll just put myself in it just to not speak for other people. For myself, I'm just like, what are the physics of the economy and how do we make sure that we get out of this? You say it's called a riot tax. I'll say, I don't want my head separated from my body, French Revolution style. And that is absolutely what ends up happening. And moderate elites die first. And as a moderate elite, I'm not super excited about that. Also, as somebody who's spent more time without money than I have with money, it's still all very familiar to me exactly what that feels like. So I look at the setup and I trigger off of something that you said earlier, which is people can afford houses. And so my whole philosophy is very simple. In 1913, the Federal Reserve System created a situation where bailing out banks became the goal. And so now you have a financial system where they're trying to socialize losses and privatize gains. So basically bankers from the act in 1913 got put in a position where heads they win and tails we all lose. Mm-hmm. And the way that they pull that off is money printing. And so because they can print money, and money printing is a tax, it's the easiest way to think about it, although I will often refer to it as theft, but they can money print and create a tax that hits everybody. And so that way they can fund all the deficit spending, all the wars that they want. They can just fund. But
you got like a reverse MMT opinion on this, where you're like, money is fake, it's printed. That's how you control. That's how the American government controls the money supply, which is understandable. And then taxing is just like taking the existing money supply out of the circulation at the end of the year, right?
Well, I would say this is modern monetary theory. Like this is the goal. So if you're saying it's anti in terms of I'm just staunchly against it, it would get you close, but not quite. So I think every system has a trade-off. Modern monetary theory allows for really high velocity of money. Once you get into high velocity of money, hey, like when I say you need to look at the world that you have and the system that you have. So the modern monetary theory gives us this world. It's a pretty great world. It has problems and it's going increasingly in the wrong direction, but it has created some incredible stuff. And so we have to figure out where exactly it breaks. And I think it breaks where you said, which is housing. Once housing becomes unaffordable, the reason you have a problem is housing is the only asset that the average person understands intuitively. The vast majority of humans are never going to map how the economy actually works. So they just know, I want to live in a house, I want to buy a house. And when they can buy a house, then this all works out fine, because even though we're in a high inflation environment where the government can print as much money as they want, the price of your house goes up with inflation. And the second that you can't afford that house, now the only asset that you understand intuitively goes out of reach. And then all that's left is the stock market, and the vast majority of humans don't understand the stock market.
You brought up some interesting points, and I think I broadly agree, at least with the outlines. I would say that as far as like banking insurance goes, I obviously don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with...
You're talking about FDIC?
Yeah, I'm talking about FDIC. So what I have a problem with is actually how consistently this government rewards failure. Yep. Or as a matter of fact, it's not even a rewarding of a failure system. It's more so that the expectation is that, yeah, these guys, like you said, are going to be playing with your money, right? Your taxes, your money. They know it. They demand it. And if they don't get it, they get mad, right? They expect it. I think we see it consistently, like with bailouts or things that happen with like during COVID, for example, where companies get bailed out. It's understandable, especially if they're like profoundly important to the logistics, the supply chain, like the commercial airliners, right? But then you have this structure where, and I thought this is what you meant when you said I have an issue with banking, because I do as well. We have a structure where like everything is turned into a bank, where the once incredibly important institutions that developed like the best new technology, like Boeing, for example, right, are now just a bank. And what I mean by that is they are way more predisposed with crunching numbers and ensuring that there is some corner cutting, but like ensuring that the shareholder value is going up at all costs. And I think that actually yields worse and worse products year over year. You start seeing these issues with Boeing products in general, where doors are flying off or whatever. That's because they have outsourced big parts of their manufacturing to low cost alternatives, and in the process, they're actually taking away some of the most important parts of the airline industry, which is to ensure that there's always redundancies, like numerous points of failure. The big problem here is that Boeing has went from being a company that develops things, makes planes, or even space shuttles and satellites and whatnot, to a company that is just a bank. It's become a bank that can point to some of the stuff that they make to, I guess, have some kind of assets, have some kind of leverage, but ultimately they're just playing with money.
It's interesting. So you're pointing out a flaw that I would say is actually more of a cultural flaw. And I think that calling them a bank is probably going to diffuse the animosity that should be aimed at actual banks. But to address the point directly, and then I'll get back to what I see as the mechanistic side. So if you see a flaw in my thinking, we can parse through that. But the cultural change that's happened is we have taken this idea of a fiduciary responsibility to like some absurd extreme where we're no longer being sensible about, okay, what are the impacts, for instance, of the safety of a plane? We know that some of these industries, they are so hard to get into. There's such a barrier to entry that starting up your own plane company is basically not going to happen. And so there's going to be a very limited number of people. And so the level of innovation has declined. And so when you look at innovation in aerospace, it was like 66 years between the Wright brothers realizing that we could fly and then landing on the moon. And now, until Elon Musk comes along, there's basically no innovation whatsoever. It's pretty wild. So that's one problem. So if culturally we could get people behind the idea of we want there to be more competition there, what do we have to do to facilitate that? That within the company that that there's just certain things that you don't do, and you predicate your company on safety or innovation or whatever, but you certainly don't predicate it, to your point, of just like optimizing every single penny. But going back to the banks, I think this is such a catastrophic problem, and the beef that I have with people that are turning towards socialism, and the reason that I think that is going to be absolutely disastrous for assuming that we want to get to the same place, is that mechanistically it doesn't yield the economic outcomes that people want, where people actually can thrive. They can buy a home. They can, if they can outperform, if they can build something that the world wants, that they can change their station, that we have economic mobility. And that comes down to the way that the banking system and money printing is structured such that the banks can't lose. They can make every ridiculous loan they want to. There's no discipline forced upon them. And so it ends up creating a situation where you make a home impossible to purchase, really through two things. One, the banking that we've talked about so far, and then globalization, by making it impossible for laborers to actually have a voice.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't disagree with you. I just expand further on it and describe the system that we're existing under as like, or banking is a profoundly important aspect of this. Again, Marx did write extensively about the financialization of the economy, or the global financial market structure, and what and how different that was as opposed to a new way to approach the inequities within the system, a different way to approach the built-in inequalities within the system. Because these are like, at the end of the day, it's like a this is not my term for it, but it's like a faceless, lifeless bourgeois class that never actually ends up going to the factory floor, right? Like they have no they have no say. They have all the say in how the product gets made, or corner cutting and things of that nature, but like they have no understanding of the way that these things are being produced, right? They can just own things, and they make money through owning things. So I think that's like the fundamental problem that he identifies.
You're saying that when you're the owning class,
Yeah.
and you are disconnected from the hands-on building,
Yeah.
that breaks something in the certainly your relationship to the labor. I'm putting words in your mouth now, so please definitely tell me if I'm reading this wrong. But it would break your understanding of them as like humans that deserve dignity, and so making sure that they're paid well and they're treated well. But it also makes you optimize the actual product in a way that's nonsensical.
Yeah, because optimization. I was listening to how Toyota was able to like restructure at a time when they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Is post World War II. They have this like industrial base. They're using it for car manufacturing. And at a certain point, like I think there was these two guys. One's last name is Toyota. I forget the other one's last name. But they like come to America. They look at the Ford assembly line, and they're like shocked by how well it works. But then they go to this like grocery store, I guess, and then they find out that in that process, there's like there is so much input that you could rely on from every point of the assembly process. So in the Toyota factories, they decide to put this like yellow line where any person, any human being on the assembly line can actually stop the process at any point, because human beings are much easier, especially doing this route task where they're like constantly doing the same thing over and over again. They're much more tuned into minor changes or minor issues, so that they don't have to rely on like the assembly line continuing no matter what, with like a failed build out that they figure out later down the line, and then they have to suffer financial consequences and do like a recall. You don't have to do recall or whatever. And I think that kind of impact or that kind of feedback is profoundly important, because the person that is their hands on the product is always going to be more knowledgeable than the person that's making decisions by simply crunching numbers or simply looking at how to maximize the efficiency.
We'll be back to the show in a second, but first let's talk about a big mistake I see aspiring entrepreneurs make all the time. Most people never get their business off the ground because they get overwhelmed by the legal maze. When we were founding Impact Theory, I wanted to reach through the phone and go berserk on the people on the other end, because the legal stuff is so painful. I'm talking about LLC paperwork, business licenses, tax structures, invoicing systems. You're ready to build, but you are drowning in legal requirements you don't understand. Taylor Brands eliminates the roadblock. You can register your LLC in minutes, not weeks. They handle every legal document, license, and permit automatically. You get invoicing and bookkeeping built in so you can collect payments from day one. Plus, their coaching program guides you through your first 100 days, step by step. I'm gonna hook you guys up with a 35% discount. Just go right now to taylorbrands.com/podcast35. Do not be a statistic. Set your business up right from day one. All right, let's get back to the show. I would agree with that in the abstract, but I'm presuming that people that lean socialist hate Elon Musk, and Elon Musk sleeps on the floor of his facilities, understands the engineering of the facilities probably better than anybody on the floor because he's done it at all of his different companies. If I had to make a bet on who would be the best person to build any manufacturing facility, it would, and I mean in the world, I would bank on Elon Musk, just given the number of industries that he's done this across. Now, it's possible that he's just spinning PR, but Samsung has invited him to come and walk the floor because they're going to be making chips for Tesla, and they want him to help improve their output. So but I know that doesn't solve a lot of the problems that people are rightly angry about in terms of the wealth inequality. I teach entrepreneurship, and I will often tell entrepreneurs one of the biggest problems you're up against is emotions are going to make dots feel like they connect that don't actually connect. And as soon as you try to turn that into policy, prescriptive, like go do this, it won't work because it's not actually rooted at the level of physics. And so when you look at like what's breaking down with wealth inequality, that to me, again, we're just right back at money printing. So once people understand there's a difference between income and wealth inequality, wealth are assets. It's potential income, but it's not real income. And so right now, the top 10% Americans own 95% of the assets. I mean, it's just absolutely staggering. So you've got people, they understand the game of assets, they're scooping them all up, and then you've got basically everybody else that the only asset they understand intuitively is a home, and from money printing, we've made that impossible. But the value of a company, which are the assets, the stocks, they go up with two things. Innovation, so people care about it in the marketplace. So Tesla is doing something different and better. And so people are like, I expect that to be worth more in the future. That's the bet they're placing.
No, I know. I think
and then hold on really fast.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is money printing, because money printing creates the illusion as you devalue the dollar, it creates the illusion that the stock is going up in price.
I would agree that innovation is supposed to be like the primary way that your stock is valued and your stock goes up, like the valuation of your stock goes up. But I feel like that's not, I don't think that is necessarily the case any longer. I feel like the market is so reliant on constant, being in a constant state of bullishness that even when you see
drives that, because I agree, but I think we're going to agree for different reasons.
I think it's partially because money is fake, and we've just decided like, oh, it doesn't matter if Donald Trump decides to slap 150% tariffs on like all incoming goods. You'll have a week of instability, and then ultimately he'll turn around and say, actually, the tariffs are gone, and then the market will rally again. And will inevitably recover back to the point that it was at. And then he will turn around and say tariffs again. And after the 10th time he's done this, after months and months and months, you start noticing that these companies are like, okay, maybe it's not that significant. Maybe it's not that impactful. Maybe we can actually eat some of these costs. And that's the reason why you haven't seen the hyperinflation that was slated to come if companies were supposed to respond in the way that the market is normally supposed to respond to immediate tariffs like this, like broad universal tariffs like this. So and as far as like innovation goes, as far as Elon goes, I'm not a fan of Elon. He's not a fan of mine. He's cursed me out on his platform in the past. But I will say, you brought up innovation in the first 66 years, going from the Wright brothers all the way to landing on the moon. Right. And you said before Elon, we had no innovation in the space traveling sector. And there's some truth to that. But I think that is an inefficiency of the government, because the first 66 years, big leaps were made by the government, by publicly funded research, by NASA. And it was always in a state of disrepair because it turned into political football. The only reason why we even went to the moon was because we wanted to flex on the USSR, who had actually beaten us to space, right? And therefore there was funding in the program. But as the Cold War took a turn and we decided that this was no longer as important, NASA funding was always on the docket to be cut, right? Instead of something that we focused on for the sake of advancing mankind. And my point always has been we shouldn't rely on we shouldn't wait for private industry to make up for these issues. We should have, especially fields that require innovation and requires failure, requires big technological leaps, like, figuring out the internet, like inventing the internet or inventing space travel, things of that nature. Like, that should be still heavily funded by the government, heavily subsidized by the government, and even controlled by the government. I have no issue with this. A lot of people, especially in America, get worried when they hear me say this kind of stuff. Same with housing. You can do major public housing initiatives and just completely explode the housing market in its entirety. And by that I mean explode the housing market as in like build free or incredibly affordable price adjusted housing that the government owns. Many countries and many cities that have actually damn near eradicated the issue of homelessness have done so through public ownership over the land. This is a scary concept for a lot of Americans.
Where are you talking about?
Singapore is a great example as a country. China is another great example.
Singapore specifically privatized.
No, but Singapore still has like a government land lease program.
But if you really research Lee Kuan Yew, I use this word playfully, not literally, but he was a gangster. Like he said, literally, I made sure the communists know I will fight you to the death. He went in and told unions, fucking knock it off, get to work.
I know, but in terms of housing, in terms of like the way that
his whole thing was, I wanted private ownership. People had to know that they were in on the economy, because the only way to build an economy on capitalistic principles is to make sure that everybody's in on it.
Yeah.
Like Singapore is an incredible model for people that want a way out, but they often look at that and don't realize that this guy was like Captain Capitalism.
I'm not saying this guy was I never said that any of these countries, well, I guess China, with the exception of China, are like even abiding by the principles of socialism or communism. That's not my advocacy at all. The other example I was going to use is Austria, which again was led by obviously Red Vienna was led by people who are from that background, Marxist, socialist, communist, and whatever. But like Austria as a country is not a communist country and is not a socialist country, and yet Vienna has I think 65% public housing, and these are fantastic houses. Like, it's just owned by the government, and then they have these lease programs. Every country has a different way of doing it, but I think ultimately government intervention of that sort is not something that I disagree with. I don't really care. They don't have to be like communists or socialists or whatever. I want to fix the problem. And I think one of the best ways to do that, or at least one of the most efficient ways that people have done that, is through this kind of intervention or direct control to a certain degree.
This kind of intervention is government owned?
Government-owned intervention, like the land ownership concept goes back to the hands of the government, and you can get like in China, you can get a 100-year lease, right? And the government will always restore your lease. There's no, there's no problem there. But for this very reason, there is a lot more control over focusing on building inventory for future demand rather than holding inventory in the hands of people that want to keep that inventory limited so that their prices are constantly going up. So like you said, the only way that their net worth goes up is if this finite supply housing, if you're lucky enough to be able to purchase it, or lucky enough to get a mortgage to purchase it, the finite supply of housing stays limited so that it's constantly going up, and therefore your leverage is more valuable, your nest egg is more valuable, and you understandably have this like perverse interest in maintaining the housing supply as low as possible. And the inverse of that, if you were to blow up the already limited housing supply and you were to actually explode and build so much housing, specifically through government intervention.
Why specifically through government intervention?
Because I don't think that there is ever going to be an unleashing of the markets that will be able to overcome the interests of like real estate developers or even like anyone who owns this kind of inventory.
And Austin have both shown that you can do it privately.
So that's actually a great example of this as well. Austin and Houston, Texas went in and built a lot of housing, but now there's tremendous complications. Obviously, Houston in and of itself is literally on a floodplain, so it's they're cooked regardless.
They might be dumb, but so the fundamental debate is going to be, okay, you and I, shockingly, we agree on a lot of the problem, but where, like, we haven't even gotten into the DSA yet, which I have like wild reactions to, which we'll get to.
Okay.
But I'm like you, I sincerely want a solution. And so then I'm like, okay, well, as an entrepreneur, when you're faced with, I'm either going to be able to make payroll or I'm not, you get pretty realistic really fast. It's not ideological. It's just like, Jesus, how am I going to make sure that everybody's family can go eat? So I take a similar approach to this. So when you look at all the different countries that have tried socialist programs, including the rent controls that we did in the Bronx in the 60s and 70s, which absolutely decimated the Bronx. And the way that you build back, of course, is to release the regulatory requirements, not keep adding them. So it becomes a question of mechanistically what works, government control or regulation, because when capitalism is left unchecked, you get the Gilded Age. Not good.
Yeah.
A total atrocity, dangerous levels of inequality. When you
We're there now.
overregulate, yeah, but for a different reason. And this is the thing, like I'm always trying to get people to understand. When you try to map what's happening now onto the Gilded Age, you're going to miss that they're happening for very different reasons. And so if you try to rerun the playbook of how we dealt with the Gilded Age, it won't work here, because here you have one very simple problem. And that problem is you are money printing. And when you money print, you're stealing from everybody and you're only giving to the wealthy. And so it's like, bro, you can't keep doing that. And so if you're in a situation where you're just going to embrace modern monetary theory, because if I could snap my fingers and get rid of the Fed, that's probably a better place. But as Drew, my producer, keeps assuring me that's never going to happen. So I'm like, fine. But if you're within that system and you know that you have a high inflationary environment, then you have to act as if you're in a high inflationary environment. And the only way to deal with that is to make sure that people can get into assets. If you do not make it possible for them to get into assets, you're toast. So then we go, okay, well, if we agree that the house is the one asset that everybody understands intuitively, and the stock market should become this big, terrifying gambling machine, then it's like, how do we get people into housing? Is it going to be governmental control? I would say we've tried that. Other countries have tried that. Always a disaster. And they end up, even in the Nordic countries, they end up reverting to privatization just because of the price signals alone. And so zooming in on Houston and Austin, because they ran these, what we'll call natural experiments, it has shown us exactly like how you can win at this problem. Now, there's always going to be moments where, okay, this is rough. Like the prices over COVID in Austin doubled or tripled in like 6 months. Wild.
Yeah.
And so now people were like, oh my God, like how am I ever going to afford a home? But then over the next couple of years, the prices normalized because builders were allowed to build. They were fast tracking. They were changing regulations so they could fast track building. So everything normalized. Houston already had that. So in Houston, you can basically build if you want to build. And so housing prices don't go up much. And you keep an available supply for people, floodplain or not. And you can argue that this is dumb, they shouldn't build there. But at least the mechanism by which they allow people to build ensures that people have access to reasonably priced homes.
Florida is another example of that as well, where like they let builders build and the city has exploded, right? And the time frame that I lived there, I lived in Florida for the first year of my life in America. In 2009, it was like Brickell was non-existent virtually. It was just being built at that point. And now it's like so expansive. And I see the advantage of that, certainly. I don't mind the explosion of the housing supply. I want that to happen regardless, whether it's private or public. My assessment always is, well, the reason why the Texas housing market is like not rebounding necessarily, but like kind of I mean, it's going down in terms of prices is because like people are leaving Texas, or at least people are leaving Austin and Dallas and Houston, like these places that they initially moved to during COVID. I feel like that's a big part of that. Or at least maybe this is anecdotal because I see a lot of like, people who are rich in my immediate group of friends who are streamers who moved to Texas in that time frame and are now like going, I don't know what to do with this house that I bought. Like I want to leave. I want to sell it. And they're having a harder time doing so. But ultimately, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And for me, I just don't care about, and I'm a homeowner myself. I got canceled for buying a house. People were very mad at me. They were like, socialism means you can't have an expensive house. What are you talking about? I don't mind if the property value goes down. I don't think that homes are a speculative asset. I think they should be treated as shelter, something that is necessary for survival. And that is the fundamental disagreement that I have with many other people. And I think that the fact that this is associated with perhaps the only way that people can have some kind of asset, some kind of capital, homes are the only way that people can have like some kind of upward social mobility, is part of the reason why the housing market never changes in the direction where people can afford homes or people can buy homes. And it goes back to what you said earlier. We privatize the gains and we socialize the losses. Homes are they were not intended as a speculative asset. The GI Bill and all of these numerous other protections that people have implemented in terms of home ownership, or even the banners that we placed against home ownership or mortgages, for example, for Black people in the form of redlining, have always been used by the bankers to safeguard their investment, which is why a lot of people both look at homes as an investment, but also a shelter, and take advantage of the safeguards that exist that were put in place so that people don't lose their homes. But they use that to like beef up their inventory and gamble with other people's money, basically, to never lose. It's almost like if we're looking at investments as a form of gambling, a little bit smarter than gambling, obviously. There's fundamentals associated with it. Home ownership. What's up?
Sort of. I get a lot of flack for my take on that, but I get your point. If people adhered to the fundamentals, it would be different.
There are fundamentals in the market, for sure. There's fundamentals in the stock, but like there's still probability, right? You never know something.
Yeah, but you can make money betting against something, and by betting against it, you influence the market. Blah blah blah.
For sure.
I don't want to derail down that rabbit hole, but in an inflationary.
What I was saying is like buying a house is almost like it's still a speculative asset that you're technically investing into.
But it has to be.
And it has to be, sure.
But a minute ago you said it shouldn't be, and I'm saying it has to be.
But my point is, it's a speculative asset that's also shelter, so there's so many protections against like losing it, and that I think a lot of people basically take advantage of that dual structure that exists for housing. So they make it into a speculative asset that is like impossible for its price to go down, pretty much, unless there are major market incidents like the 2008 housing market bubble.
Yes, but we have to like figure out why is it that it's so hard for these to go down in value. And the reason it's so hard for them to go down in value is the amount of money that's being printed causes assets to go up. And then, to your point earlier, if you have NIMBYism and people are not in my backyard, you're not going to build high density housing. And so the property
I love high density housing.
Of course. And so it's like, this is how you're going to have to drive down the cost of housing and make it affordable. That's just a reality. So it's what I'm saying is people need to understand why that's happening. It is not happening because capitalism bad. It is happening because money printing bad. Now, money printing trade-off is probably the right way to say it. Money printing comes with advantages and it comes with wild disadvantages. And people are not mapping cause and effect well. And so we're getting into a situation where they don't realize that money printing is the problem. So going to the Democratic Socialist of America, is that what DSA stands for?
That's what DSA stands for.
Going to the DSA, it's like all of the things that they want are going to exacerbate those problems. And so this is where I'm like, hey, even if we can agree, I don't know that I agree with the DSA and where they're trying to end up. So it's probably worth me saying where I want to end up. And if you see yourself as a member of that or not, if you can help us understand what people that want that organization to thrive, what they're aimed at, that would be very useful. What I'm aimed at is people can save money and it's not stolen away from them through the hidden tax of inflation, that people can afford a home because it is an asset that they understand intuitively, that people can make a living wage through market dynamics, and that basically you're not stuck in your class. So there's high social mobility. Your future isn't determined by your zip code. I round that to human flourishing, but those are like the specific things that I'm pointed at. Now, when I look at the DSA, they seem literally at wild odds with that, wanting to abolish the family, capture the means of production. Like it gets pretty wild. Now,
No, the first thing is funny. That's not abolishing the family is not a thing that the DSA is predisposed with. Everyone always says that, but they're
that's
not.
because there's clips I've watched with my own eyes where they say that. They had a whole meeting about it.
I think I can't speak on the exact clips that you've seen, but there are people with wildly different opinions on things of that nature. So
you would say that's fringe, even for them.
I would go so far as to say that not only is it fringe, but it's also not like a real consequential policy-driven focus of the Democratic Socialists of America. It's not a focus of the DSA at all.
Would you advise them against it?
Abolishing the family?
Yes.
Because it's not even like a legitimate point of contention. It's not even worth discussing. I will say it's usually, I think in my experience, the way that these things work is people will have sometimes even academic conversations in these sorts of settings about what it means to have a family, or what's the traditional nuclear family, or what its impact has looked like in society or whatever. And then someone will basically film a piece of that conversation of someone being very sincere, but maybe being almost hysterical, right? And then they'll be like, look, this is so silly. The entire organization is predisposed with this. They're not. Especially when it comes to cultural things. There is no policy making about family enforcement within the DSA whatsoever.
Okay, so walk me through then, because I'm looking at those clips and I am admittedly going, this is crazy. And from a Marxist standpoint of wanting to eliminate the family as an economic unit, which they echo that language, it does make me go, there are dots for them to connect. And I see how if they believe in a Marxist worldview that they end up there. You saw that play out in China. People really do enact these policies, and it ends up being, from where I'm sitting, absolutely.
Do you mean the one-child policy or something?
No. I'm talking Mao's China. Mao's China was the state is going to take care of you. All that matters is the state. You're not there for mom and dad. You are there for the state. And if you got to turn on mom and dad so we can beat them to death, then you better do it. And they would literally beat them to death.
I don't think the Cultural Revolution was good per se, but I also don't think that it was because the young people abolished the family unit and decided to beat on their parents because they were counter-revolutionary.
You're not going to get kids to turn in their parents if you don't break that unit. So anyway, if I'm deranged on that, I'm willing to accept that.
I don't think that's what the DSA wants.
So map out for me. My initial question is, hey, a lot of people are turning towards socialism. You're saying that's self-evident, and I'm saying these are the things that I believe about the socialist movement, and you're saying no. You're
the family stuff is utterly irrelevant. And also, these guys, there are so many different variants of how to implement socialism. That exists under one umbrella, where they're broadly, I would say, anti-capitalist, but even then, there's still people who are social democrats, for example, not even democratic socialists, that play a role in this movement, that just want some kind of regulation over the most insane aspects of endless greed-backed capitalism. But things like abolishing the family is not a real point of contention, or even remotely relevant. I think they care more about labor union organizing, implementing certain policies like Medicare
really fast
for all.
On labor. So let's take them one by one. So labor union organization. What's their end goal with that?
They want workers to have more power to collectively bargain directly at their place of business. And therefore create a network of pushback against capital owners when they implement certain policies.
Now, the data shows that union organization is far less impactful on somebody's economic gain than globalization. Globalization, where I, as an entrepreneur, can be like, nah, I'm just not going to do this in Michigan. I'm going to go do this in Tokyo or whatever, is the thing that erodes their power. So are people that are headed towards socialism, are they is that a big bone for them, where it's listen, what we care about are worker wages, and unions are maybe part of it, but the reality is, as long as we're importing cheap labor and we're exporting jobs, workers, blue collar workers for sure, are not going to have negotiating power.
Oh no, I think this is something that a lot of people understand. There's plenty of all labor unions are pretty much trade protectionist. Like that's part of the reason why even the UAW, despite its anti-Trump position, was looking at the initial tariffs conversations and saying like, hold on, we're not going to immediately attack Donald Trump for this because on principle, this is something that is, if done correctly, could be very helpful to the auto manufacturing business, the automobile industry. Of course, given the way that we've designed the automobile industry, especially with like some of the free trade negotiations that we've built with Canada and Mexico that Trump also implemented, even though he came in as an anti-NAFTA force initially, there is no way to there's no way to do trade protectionism that doesn't actually eradicate certain parts of the manufacturing base in this country and still ultimately be harmful to the UAW. But going back to the DSA or labor unions, you're right. Outsourcing, displacing labor is the primary function of capital. They want to displace labor because that is efficient. If you have technological improvements that allow you to, for example, do the work of 10 people now with one person, then what I would say should be done is to make that, never fire the 9 other employees, but instead make all 10 of those employees do a tenth of the work that they have to do, like a tenth of the direct labor that they have to do when their output remains the same. A boss looks at that situation and goes, oh, that means we can fire 9 workers and make 1 worker do the work of 10. And labor is obviously the most malleable aspect of commodity production, and therefore it's the one that bosses are constantly looking to depress the wages on or to outsource to the global south, where it's a much cheaper alternative. Labor unions play a formative role in ensuring that transition does not harm the existing domestic manufacturing base of labor to the best of their ability. They either create better exit packages that take away from, CEO pay or whatever that will allow these people to transition into other sectors easier. They retain pensions, or ultimately in places where they do exist, where there is continued output at the domestic front. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, labor unions are responsible for increasing people's wages by 10% in areas where they unionize. And they even have a capacity to increase wages for the non-unionized parts of the same sector in the immediate vicinity, because other companies look at that as market competition, and they have to improve their wages and maybe even offer additional benefits packages in an effort to avoid unionization at their workplaces. So it's profoundly beneficial. And I think like a lot of people look back fondly at the 60s, right? Where at a time when like America was great, when we had a job, you could do like a blue collar job at a factory and you could own a house and you could raise 2 children, right? And what they mistake is it was actually the union power and the labor power that people had back then that allowed these jobs to exist with the benefits, with the pension.
Okay, this is where we violently disagree. So
okay.
if you look at the timeline, this is a money printing problem. This is about debt and money printing, and people get so confused about what caused the real problem. So you have debt, money printing, and globalization. That's it. And if people just talk about those things, then all of a sudden they're going to be able to map to reality what happened. This is why people always ask the question, what happened in 1971? Because in 1971, that's when all hell breaks loose. And in 1971, we broke our last remaining thread. We were about 25% tied to the gold standard. Mm-hmm. And so when we finally let that go, then it became unhinged money printing. But for a long time, we actually didn't go that ham. And it wasn't really until 2008 that we just got unhinged. And if you look at the M2 money supply graph, it goes berserk.
I don't disagree with you. It's just funny because like, I think that is just another aspect of like the way that the system has been designed. So we're just like basically unleashing the same forces because these are the exact same principles that create income and wealth inequality in general. So like this is more of the same in terms of like the super wealthy making out far better than the average person.
We'll get right back to the show in a second, but first, let me tell you what keeps my team fueled. At this point, Impact Theory basically runs on Paleo Valley beef sticks. Walk through our office and you're gonna find them tucked away in every desk drawer, including in my backpack. Anytime I'm gonna be traveling, I have these bad boys with me. These are what keep people going. Paleo Valley's beef sticks are a smart choice for high performers with 6 grams of clean protein, 0 sugar, and 0 artificial preservatives. They're made from 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef with organic spices and have no gluten, soy, or corn to slow you down. Paleo Valley is amazing and they use natural fermentation, the old world method that creates gut-friendly probiotics in every stick. While other brands use harsh chemicals and GMO citric acid, these are made clean. Right now, you can get 30 beef sticks for just $36. That's clean, gut-friendly protein for barely over $8 per stick. Make sure to click my link below and get your 30 beef sticks for just 36 bucks. And now let's get back to the show. Yes, but what the reason that I harp on this is because to get the problem right and the solution wrong, or more importantly, to get the problem right but the cause wrong, means that you will definitionally get the solution wrong because you don't know what's actually causing the problem. The story I always like to tell is I woke up one day with a skin rash and it got so bad that I would wake up in the middle of the night and I just wanted to cry because it just itched so badly. I couldn't sleep. It was an absolute nightmare. So of course I go see a skin specialist and they're like, hey, you've introduced some detergent or something. They're like, this happens all the time. You just don't realize that you're having an allergic reaction. So we're like changing everything, no scented, like all this, it's not working. And I'm like, if somebody came to me and said they had a skin condition, what advice would I give them? And I would say, it's something you're eating. And so I'm like, even though my diet is perfectly clean, there's clearly something I'm eating that's causing a problem. And so I completely cut out artificial sweeteners. 72 hours later, it was gone. So I was like, oh my God. But everybody wants to give you a topical solution. And that was the first thing. They wanted me to put creams on it and the creams helped. And it alleviated. I was like, oh my God, thankfully. But that didn't address the underlying problem. And as soon as I actually got to the thing that was actually causing it, it went away and it went away forever. And so what I'm saying is we all agree that the skin is itchy. We all agree that America has a skin rash. What we don't agree on is what's causing the skin rash. What's causing the skin rash, 1913 Federal Reserve Act says we can print money. 1971, our last restraining thread gets broken. And then in the 90s, we go full globalization, most importantly, China. And so once you put that very small, very understandable bundle on the table, it's like, there are all your problems. But people focus on more, the rhetoric is all about animosity towards wealthy people, which is why people got mad at you when you bought your house, instead of going, oh, wait a second, I actually understand the fundamental nature of the system. It's broken at the level of debt, money printing. And when I say debt, government debt's the right one to focus on, but there's personal debt, corporate debt, and government debt. But we are in such a dark place from a debt and money printing perspective. And I just cannot get people to focus on it because it doesn't feel.
Well, I think the difference in opinion stems from you're saying the artificial sweetener in this situation is the debt and globalization and money printing.
Correct.
And I'm saying that the artificial sweetener, which is we are identifying the symptoms, and I think that the debt and the money printing is yet another factor in an even broader problem, in a broader systemic problem.
But when you start looking at the actual impact of what drives it, I did the math on this once, but it was union negotiations is 8% or something. So it's not that it's nothing. It's that when you look at the totality of the problem, it's not even 10%.
Oh, I'm not saying that unions are, first of all, I don't think unions are the only impactful force here. I don't even think that unions are the only way to solve this problem. I think it's just one mechanism. It's kind of like you brought up rent control, right? Rent control in and of itself is not a solution. It's barely a Band-Aid. It's a move. It's an initiative to in the interim to move in the direction of decommodifying housing. That's the reason why people utilize it. But I think without adjusting the supply, without actually either introducing some kind of market force, like new interest in developing housing projects, or and readjusting the inventory that's readily available, so that more people can live in homes, and then that actually depresses the existing price, the average home price for the average person, and it actually lowers rents as well, because there's now new inventory available, even from a healthy market assessment. If private industry is not going to do that, I say let the government intervene. I have no issues with that.
Okay, but
it's just one aspect of a much larger issue, is what I mean. Like, labor unions are not the end all,
underlying read of the situation that I think is incorrect. And if I'm painting you wrong, I consider you at least sympathetic to socialism.
Oh, for sure. I say I'm a leftist because, like, I'm big tent in terms of all the way from, revolutionary socialists or even communists to people who want to implement modest social democratic reforms in the interim. I believe in harm reduction, and I think the best possible way to achieve that is, especially with the appetite that Americans have in general for these sorts of ideologies that they either completely don't know or have been propagandizing to being fearful of.
But so that's where I'll say it's not propaganda. Like, there is, but let's dig into it, because there are mechanistic reasons to be fearful of socialism or communism. And we can literally take them one by one, but some things work in the messiness of reality, and other things don't work in the messiness of reality. And I think the reason that people are going so ham into socialism right now is that it feels right, but it's not actually going to yield the right outcomes. So it feels right because people have been propagandized that what you're actually up against is an evil capitalistic system where people are trying to take advantage of you. And they've come up in a system that is extraordinary. They've come up in the West and things are stable. People are relatively safe. Until recently, it was like most people could get on the property ladder. It was like, yeah. So people have lost sight of what drives tax dollars. The very thing that gives people the money that they want to spend on these systems is the entrepreneurial class builds a company that outputs something more valuable than the inputs. It is excruciatingly difficult to do. And when you see only negativity in that system and think that somehow the money is still going to be there, even if you are punitive towards that class, which I think is what most people that are on that bandwagon want. And now you end up breaking the very goose that lays the golden egg.
See, this is where we fundamentally disagree, because I don't think innovation is immediately tied back to profits. I don't think that, and I don't think it's even historically how it's been. Like, I like to joke and say, like, people didn't invent the tire because they thought, I can commodify this and sell it and make money. I think that there are many achievements that we take for granted throughout history, all the way from primitive accumulation down to the current existence of society, the current economic formation that we exist under, where plenty of people have actually advanced humanity, not on the basis that they'll make a lot of money, but on advancing humanity alone, like other factors that contribute to it, whether it be improving people's welfare or whether it be because you have a human first approach. And beyond that, I think even still,
and you think that's gone now?
No, I think it still exists, but we're tampering with it for the sake of greed. Because I think capitalism inevitably creates a system where people are focusing on short-term profits, and when you focus on short-term profits, you end up throwing aside all of these like technological leaps that we have made in times when there was a lot more government funding, a lot more public funding, a lot more public investment, both in other countries, even ones that we have declared foreign adversaries, even ones that had their own personal systemic failures, mind you. I'm not saying the USSR was like amazing, but there were issues there as well. But ultimately, we've lost sight of why people innovate, why people develop new things, and it's not necessarily just because they want to make money. I mean, there's so many.
I would say China has proven it's because people want to make money.
Wait, really?
1,000%.
I was about to say China is the exact counter argument to
China
that.
tried to kill everybody, and to get them to fit in line, they killed 45 million people in a pretty short stretch. Like, that one's wild to me that people brush that one off.
I think there were USSR had a similar problem as well with like crop mismanagement and famines, but since that happened, there has never been another instance of famine in China.
But China literally came to the West and said, okay, what do we do? And they said, how many banks do you have? And China said, we only have one bank. And America said, that's crazy. We have 30,000 banks. And let me tell you how we do this. You push the decision-making down to the regional control element. You let them all be profit incentivized, and then they will loan out to the people that are actually going to be successful. What is the thing that drives somebody to take that tremendous risk when something like 90% of all companies fail to make $1 million, 94% fail to make $10 million. So that 6% of companies make more than $10 million. That means 94% of people effectively fail. So it's like you have this insane failure rate that still manages to give you America, the West, largely. So the capitalist system ends up with problems, and you have to be careful because left unchecked, it metastasizes. I like to say there's pathology on both sides. But China literally goes, okay, I'm tired of Deng Xiaoping comes into power and he's like, well, we're not going to keep doing what Mao was doing and starve people to death. So he comes up with the two phrases, doesn't matter if the cat is black or white, which was something-ish that you said earlier, just matters if it catches mice. So it doesn't matter if it's black or white, only matters if it catches mice. And then the second thing that he said was getting rich is glorious.
Well, that was attributed to him. I say it all the time as well. Socialism is not about poverty or the glorification of poverty. To be rich is to be glorious is falsely attributed to Deng Xiaoping. He never corrected it though, so people assume that it's actually something that he said. And it makes sense. I mean, I think it's an attitude that reflects in modern Chinese society as well. But Deng in and of itself is seen by, I guess, some hardline Maoists as a liberal or a reformist. But I think like there's a reason why even Xi Jinping considers like in China, they consider this as like socialism with Chinese characteristics because it is evolved in accordance to the material conditions and the global marketplace, like where capitalism is, looking at some of the even failures of the USSR in terms of global trade and trying to have a trade first approach to make themselves an undeniable force in the global marketplace so that there is not a lot of tremendous foreign intervention in the way that allows them to develop in the ways that they want to. But I think Chinese development isn't this profoundly impactful force around the globe now because of foreign capital just coming in simply on the basis of foreign capital coming in. But I think it's what they've done with that foreign capital that has made China into this powerful hegemonic force that can even counter American influence around the world now.
I don't even think that it's necessarily, sure, in the early days, getting foreign capital in was huge, very transformational, and I'm sure they would love it if it happened again, but they're not going to change their strategy. But what they did learn was American capitalistic principles. They learned how to VC the way that we VC, which is massive. They learned how to bank the way that we bank, which was massive. And so taking those characteristics, they're basically saying, we're the state, you're going to do what we tell you, but we recognize that by letting you get rich, as long as you don't get uppity, letting you get rich is exactly how we convince people to take all these risks, to regionalize things so that we can move forward, because it's just the way that human incentives work. Now, what I would, obviously, Xi Jinping is not going to agree with my assessment here, but I look at that and I go, hey, I'm Xi Jinping. You guys can keep doing this version of capitalism, what I call red light, green light capitalism, as long as you don't fuck with my agenda. And as long as you understand that I'm going to negotiate in the world globally with you as one big block. And so everyone here is going to be in lockstep behind what I want to do. And then within that framework, you guys can do whatever you want.
I know, but their economy is built around central planning still, where they like
hard pass.
Where
no
they
way. False.
Oh, okay. Well, then we definitely disagree on this because, like, I use ghost cities as an example, right? Like where there is. For years and years, we looked to China and we were like, why are they developing these like fake cities? Oh, it's to just probably try to get people to work, like to try to get like fake work so that
it's modern monetary theory. It's money printing.
So, but what we found out at least now, is that all of those ghost cities have been populated. There are still other cities where they're like still building. They're rapidly expanding. There's rapid urban development. But like the reason why those cities were built was because they had a 15-year plan in mind of like inevitably moving people from rural areas into more urban tier 1 cities and tier 2 cities. And there are still issues with the structure as well. There's a hukou system that I think needs tremendous reform. This like almost interior passport structure that they have in China. But that actually was a process in which, 800 million people were able to escape extreme poverty in China. That was a direct consequence of good government initiatives that did not put the speculative interests of the market first, but instead put the interests of citizens first.
I would say it's the exact opposite. So what they wanted to do.
So you're saying China was doing capitalism better than America, and that's why they're at the place that they're at.
They did capitalism with communist elements, and they have pulled more people out of poverty faster than anybody else in history. It is absolutely insane. And anybody that sort of brushes that off and says, that's not a functioning system, I think is a fool.
I agree.
You look at that and go, okay, what kind of system do you want to be in?
There was one other historic example as well. It was the USSR.
Well,
again, tremendous pain in that process.
Collapse, so that one's probably not great. They used to joke that we'll pretend to work and they'll pretend to pay us. So again, going back to what is it that gets people to innovate, you have to let people get wealthy. In the 90s, what happens? The government collapses, they let people get wealthy. They rush into the modern economy. Then a strong man comes in and takes over again and is now, you've got capitalism with Russian characteristics, which is basically, again, you can get as rich as you want as long as you don't get uppity. If you ever challenge me, I'm going to re-educate the shit out of you until you're either dead or until you're back in line.
I think social repression is a major issue in virtually every system, but certainly in these structures as well. We also do tend to highlight some of the inequities while simultaneously refusing to see our version of that as well.
But do you think I'm doing that? Because
no, I'm not. I'm not saying that you're doing that. I'm just in general. I'm saying like broadly, we look at the example I always use is like America has slave labor built into its structure, right? Slavery as a mechanism of punishment is still very much legal in the 13th Amendment, which was supposed to abolish slavery, right? And we look to other countries and we say, oh, they have gulags, right? Like we technically have them as well. We have a structure. We have a similar, very violent carceral state here, where we house 25% of the entire world's incarcerated population, despite making up only 4% of the overall population in this country. This isn't to say that like the systems are similar. I'm simply stating that like sometimes we end up having blind sides to our own inequities while simultaneously highlighting the inequities and the forms of repression that other people do. This isn't to excuse their forms of repression. I think they're inexcusable.
Are they worse?
I think in some instances, yes, certainly, especially historic examples. And in certain instances, is like it can even be sometimes overblown, like the social credit system that they have in China, where people will be like, oh, they have a mass surveillance and like a social credit system, but we actually do have a credit system that is, I think, far more consequential for the lives of American citizens as opposed to like what we assume the Chinese social credit function looks like.
Do you want a world where where the government has that kind of control over your life? Because you don't put the ability to track how much meat somebody buys into your system unless at some point you plan to control how much meat somebody buys. Mm-hmm. Do you like that level of control or do you fear that level of control?
There's a healthy fear to have under that kind of structure because you assume that it could be understandably used for evil, especially when you have so much power in the hands of so few people. And I think the solution to that is like an unlimited, transparent, democratic process that is constantly measuring the efficiency of the representatives, and there is a very swift mechanism of replacement when people fall short of the expectations or the demands that people are making. A democratic process. The Chinese style of governance, I think, we assume is like super top down. There is a constant feedback that comes from the party system. It's not technically one party, even though there is one governing party, obviously. But that governing party is still beholden very much to like every single locality and what their local representatives are saying, what the demands are from the population there. I don't know if it's the best possible system, but I do know that we here as an American citizen have a tremendous amount of inequality and with no real way of addressing said issues, which is why the organizations like the Democratic Socialists of America try to work within the existing duopoly to try to push the Democratic Party to hear the demands of
what do they want to see from a policy perspective? What does the DSA want to see actually happen?
So again, I'm not even I am a big booster of the Democratic Socialists of America. I'm not technically a card-carrying member, but
if you know their policies,
but I do know. Yeah.
Out. Okay.
I don't mind like broadly explaining some of their outlook, but like for example, Israel-Palestine. This is a major issue for many Americans, especially in the Democratic base. Right now,
is this a moral issue or a financial issue?
Both. It's both a moral issue and it's also a financial issue.
If you had to split the amount that they care, is it moral or financial?
I don't know what the exact adjustment on that would be, but I think it's negligible. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's horrifying. It's immoral, but ultimately it's also a policy decision that impacts Americans' lives, and it doesn't yield any benefits. If we want to make like a cold, calculated adjustment there in terms of American foreign policy and our reliance on Israel being as violent as it wants to a captive population of Palestinians, that doesn't actually return any significant benefits, and it's seemingly a system in which we're just like giving billions and billions of dollars of weapons and financial aid to a country that actually does have free healthcare, ironically enough, and they can do that because we handle all of their offensive and defensive weapons, 70% of it since October 7, 2023.
And why do you think we do it?
The reason why we do it here in America and historically have done so is because it's a settler colonial apparatus that is smack dab in the middle of a region that has incredibly important choke points for trade, for global trade. And also it's a resource-rich region, the resource that runs the global economy, oil.
So an unsinkable aircraft carrier that we can operate.
That's part of it, for sure. And that has given Israel a tremendous amount of freedom to operate within American politics in a way that no other ally has ever been able to exist under. Like there's no level of influence that Saudi Arabia has on U.S. Policy to the same degree that Israel has had, because it was an invaluable Cold War ally at times when there was pan-Arabic nationalism that was taking place, and like a lot of these countries were beginning to demand sovereignty, and maybe were finding themselves on the Soviet side in terms of like global trade or global partnerships, right? And America did not like that, so they used Israel. And because of that profoundly important status that Israel had, it was able to develop a perverse network of influence and create a system where basically any kind of pushback against Israel or any kind of pushback against like the Israeli interests could be quickly squashed away.
Is that because they gave us influence over the region, or because they're spending money on individual politicians in America, and those individual politicians want the money to keep flowing, so they don't mind sending taxpayer dollars? So they're basically accepting.
It's both. Mersheimer, there's two different minds on this. Noam Chomsky says it's an unsinkable aircraft carrier, and therefore it's profoundly important to American foreign policy, which I agree with. Mersheimer says it's the lobby. Right? It's not just AIPAC, though. It's just like all of the different arms of Israel's like incredibly sophisticated network of influence, a network of like mechanisms of control that it has over politicians in terms of like lobbying dollars and whatnot. I think it's a bit of both. I think it's not a chicken or the egg situation, because it's like if it wasn't so profoundly important as a vassal or as a mechanism of American imperialism or Western imperialism in the region, it would not have been able to develop this sophisticated network of influence. But without that sophisticated network of influence, there would have been numerous points where America could just like pull the ripcord and say, you're done. And as a matter of fact, there have been times when American presidents have enforced their tremendous power over Israel and tremendous influence over Israel. And we see that less and less now, especially after Trump won. We saw that with George H.W. Bush in the past with settlement expansion. We saw that with Ronald Reagan with Lebanon. We saw that with Joe Biden in 2021, as a matter of fact, when Joe Biden made that one phone call, said, no, you're done. We're scaling this back. And Israel, of course, followed up on those demands. But Donald Trump, unfortunately, is a very malleable person. He's very persuadable, and you can just buy his loyalty. And Israel certainly was able to do that. And that's the reason why that's the reason why we're seeing what we're seeing right now. It was a failure on Biden's part as well, make no mistake, because on Trump 1, we started the Abraham Accords. Biden did not actually scale back on that at all and did not actually put Palestinians at the forefront of this conversation in any way, shape, or form, and only accelerated this same design that Trump had implemented initially, moving the American embassy to Jerusalem. Very impactful. Did not actually scale back on the recognition of annexed territory in Golan Heights, which is technically supposed to be some Syrian territory, some Lebanese territory. Donald Trump made that annexation, which is illegal, legal. He said, we recognize it. And Biden didn't scale back on any of this. And of course, this created the powder keg that unfolded in October 7.
Now, bringing it back, though, to the DSA. So are they protectionists, isolationists? Like, how do they look at that? So they don't want to send money. They also see a moral injustice.
Yes.
But beyond the moral injustice, what like policy core principle is it that drives them to say, we got to get out of this?
I think many people in the DSA would be anti-imperialist in the sense that like they don't want the system of dominance that America has created around the world that ends up having horrible consequences that we can see in real time, like in Gaza, to continue.
So scale back America's influence on the international stage.
Well, scale back America's violent influence on and its violent interventions around the globe is broadly the idea here. And like one of the things that they voted on in the National Convention that just took place that I went to in Chicago was like, do we continue endorsing politicians because they have a massive door knocking operation all around the country, right? Like there are a lot of these guys are activists. They're at the forefront. And also they are ready to go. They're ready to go and promote politicians, right? That's something that's like very impactful. We saw that with incredible success with Zohran Mamdani in New York. And the question is, like, does the DSA continue endorsing candidates that have a wishy-washy position on this, like, otherwise black and white thing, genocide? What's
the biggest issue for the DSA? Is it Israel-Palestine?
Israel-Palestine currently is one of the biggest issues, I would say, for sure.
Okay, and that stems from America should not be violent around the world.
America should not be engaging in violent intervention around the world, and America should not be supplying unlimited weapons to a country that is using those weapons on a captive civilian population.
Okay, is there a sense of, because not only is it wrong, but we want to allocate those dollars to social programs here in the U.S.?
Yes.
Okay.
Because every dollar spent, I think it was Eisenhower ironically said that, but like every dollar spent on bombs is a dollar that could be spent on books, a dollar that could be spent on the roads here, a dollar that could be spent on hardening our infrastructure. And yet it's this endless greed that we have in one of the only impactful manufacturing bases that we have remaining in this country, which is weapons, that we have this steady flow of subsidies going to the military industrial complex. And then those weapons have to be sold somewhere. And, Israel is one of the clients that we sell those weapons to. And it's we're burning the candle on both ends. We're first subsidizing these companies. They're not even taking those subsidies and then like evenly distributing it to their workers. They're just usually keeping it at the top in the same way that most companies do. They do stock buybacks and other forms of manipulation rather than just like offer better benefits and better pay packages to their workers anyway. And then We send those weapons out to, and someone's got to use those weapons. That's endless war. War not meant to be won or lost, but war that is meant to continue, basically, so that there is a consistent churn of weapons going somewhere. And then and then our tax dollars also then go to aid packages to these countries that then buy the weapons that we initially subsidize the development of.
I'm still not sure why that's their biggest and most bread and butter if it isn't the just staunch emotional reaction that they have. But what would be their next? Like economically, what do they want to see happen in the US?
I think they, once again, I'm not a DSA spokesperson, so I think there's probably better people to speak on this than myself. But from
what prescription do you want to see?
Well, yeah, I can speak for myself. I think like there are certain inequities, certain issues in American society that broadly harm the largest group, working class Americans. I would say that healthcare is another great example of this. We have a for-profit middleman that doesn't necessarily need to exist at all in the form of healthcare, private healthcare insurance companies that have been tremendous for the GDP overall, but have led to an incredibly costly system that doesn't actually heal people, and ends up putting them under tremendous debt, tremendous financial pressure. That needs to go away. I think that workers need to have more control over their own lives, have more autonomy, have more say in the process of
How do
labor.
we get that? So
I think the first step is unionization. That's the first immediate solution to this problem. Is being able to have a say in the process. And I think that's the reason why capital earners have successfully combated the influence of labor unions in this country. And you can point to other countries like European social democracies where there's still the process of like sectoral bargaining, for example, that has allowed unions to still have some kind of power or some kind of say in the process, that have protected or that have allowed these countries to have more worker protections.
When I look at the two biggest economies in the world, the US and China, I see those as countries that have won through innovation. When you look at the countries that have run socialism, obviously you see innovation pull back. So there are graphs that will show this. I've shown one so many times, just the number of billion-dollar companies that the U.S. has created versus anybody else. Literally, you can aggregate every other country.
But I don't think that's like innovation. I don't consider like a billion-dollar company to be innovative in and of itself, because there are a lot of billion-dollar companies now that are just they're. I don't necessarily think their output is that innovative. Like Uber is a great example of this. Mm-hmm. Uber in and of itself is a disruptive force. It's very, it's a billion-dollar company.
Uber was not innovative?
Yeah, I think it was innovative not in the sense that like they were able to build out a new technology. It was innovative in the sense that it created a massive gig economy of
you may not like the output, but in terms of innovation, they saw that, everybody now has a phone in their pocket, drivers and people alike. We can completely disrupt this system by putting these things together.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it feels like you may not like the outcome, but to say that it wasn't innovative feels very strange.
So it is innovative in the sense that, like you said, it's disruptive, but it's actually taking
But it made my life better.
Yeah. But it's taking, so there's, again, we go back to the numerous ways to skin a cat, black cat, white cat, as long as you're catching the mice, it doesn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. But there are differences here where like your life could be, have you lived in other countries in the past at all or no?
Yes.
Where have you lived, if you don't mind me asking?
London.
So you lived in London. London is not necessarily the best example of this, but like you lived in a system where there was public transit. You, I assume, took public transit at that time.
They privatized it.
Yes, I know, which is why it's bad now. But there was
by the numbers, it's better. So they do twice as many trips at roughly the same level of consistency as when it was privatized, made public. And that, like, if you look at across Europe, you see that over and over and over. So Sweden public makes public the telecom system, only to reverse that, realizing without the market forces, you just get a degradation of service. This is why we protect against monopolies in the U.S.
So this is what I was going to say. I have the exact
terrible.
opposite. I have the exact opposite assessment of the situation, where I think that privatization and at first looks like a better thing, and it's sold as like innovative, but then inevitably it leads to private companies corner cutting and actually giving a worse service overall. Whereas not being beholden to endless profit seeking allows some of these systems to thrive, because ultimately it's not supposed to be for profit. It's supposed to make sure that people are transported. It's like the U.S. Postal Service.
Right. So not supposed to be for profit. I get why you say that. But when you're dealing with the realities of the human psyche, it's like you have to do something to incentivize people to work that hard, take those huge risks. And that always becomes the part where I think people are not being honest about how hard it is to build and scale a company. And so there's this idea, as my read of socialism goes something like this: the miracle is redistribution, versus the miracle is being able to create a system that outputs something more valuable than its inputs. And I've spent the last 25 years of my life trying to do that, sometimes succeeding, sometimes failing, but it's always brutally difficult. And so the question becomes, why would I put myself through that? And the reason that you put yourself through it is you're playing a game where it's like, I can win. Like, I can really make something that the world loves, that people are like, man, you've made my life better. And that feels awesome. I've been able to maximize my talent and intelligence in a way that matters. So meaning and purpose means a lot to me. I control my own destiny, so I have autonomy.
Yeah, you have autonomy. That's the reason why you want people to become entrepreneurs, so they have autonomy. I have autonomy in my life as well, because I guess technically own and operate, and I'm the sole laborer of my own business, right? And I want people to have that. Your
editors are going to be hurt to hear you say you're the sole laborer. Your editors will be hurt to hear you say you're the sole laborer.
But I'm like the key man, and if I wasn't actually streaming, like there is not another person out there who is working that I'm paying so that they can stream, and then we ship off that footage to the editors, right? Like if I were to stop streaming, then my editors would also not be able to make any money in the process, because the business would not generate any sort of revenue. You're right, though. You're absolutely right. I do have editors. I also have a cooperative owned podcast as well. But the point I'm trying to make is that if I stopped streaming, or if I stopped podcasting, like these businesses would fall apart in and of itself. But I want everyone, just like my editors have, to be able to have autonomy and to have a say in the process of making things. And I think that actually helps with the efficiency, or helps build better, more innovative products down the line in ways that we can't immediately foresee.
I agree, but why is the government the right way to make sure that happens?
Well, the government simply acts as a regulatory mechanism here. This isn't to say that like everything should be state-owned enterprises, but I think that even if you have a private structure, for example, like in many European social democracies, as long as you don't allow the profit-seeking aspect to take complete control over whatever the services you're providing or whatever the goods that you're creating, then the government should implement certain regulatory checks to ensure that there is still this balance where workers do have fair wages, better benefits packages, and that the market is heavily regulated, because it's already heavily incentivized through the form of subsidies, but we demand nothing in return in Western liberal democracies for said subsidies in most circumstances. We just kind of give people money. We give companies money, and we're like, do whatever you want with it. We trust you to make the right decision with this. I think when we do this subsidy process, there should be certain demands that the government is making. You have to ensure that all of your workers have a living wage. You have to ensure that you're not like employing children. You know what I mean? You have to ensure that they get paid time off, paid family leave. I think these are perfectly reasonable demands that the government should make from their companies.
What happens when, take minimum wage, right? Where you want to increase it as much as possible. You want a quote unquote living wage, but when you do it, you get adverse, from where I'm sitting, consequences, like it increases the rate at which people automate. that people have a harder time getting entry-level jobs because as an entrepreneur, if you're making me pay somebody, twice what I would otherwise pay them for that entry-level position, it's not an entry-level position anymore. So now I'm going to look for somebody that's worth that amount of money.
This is where labor unions come in. Labor unions are supposed to ensure that even in the process of automation, you don't actually end up firing people. That automation is not used as a mechanism to displace the existing labor force, as we talked about already, but instead it's to lower the burden of the existing labor force. So that,
how do you reconcile, though, that the average consumer wants everything as cheaply as possible? They seem completely blind to the fact that they, as a worker, are the reason things aren't cheaper. So it's like, I want cheap goods, but I also want a much higher minimum wage. And that tension, which I honestly think the vast majority of the public is unaware of where that problem comes from, like, how do we reconcile that?
I think in a weird way, we're kind of seeing a version of that with Donald Trump right now, who's like bullying companies to ensure that they eat the cost of the tariffs. Not sure exactly where this is going to go, but like,
do you like that or dislike that?
I dislike Donald Trump heavily, but that is one aspect of his administration that I was like genuinely shocked by, that like companies are openly admitting that they're currently eating as much as the tariffs as they possibly can, which means that there was room, there was some movement to shed away some of their profit rates in an effort to even improve workplace conditions and improve the benefit structures or the compensation that they are offering their regular workers. They just had never done so because there was no intimidation coming from the executive. Whereas right now there is intimidation coming from the executive. So they're basically just eating away as much as the profits as possible. And then in return, they're giving that in the form of tariffs, the entry tax, back to this administration. God knows what they're going to do with that money. I don't think they're going to actually use it for anything good. And that's a totally separate problem. But on principle, it seems like there is more money to move around in a lot of these companies than we actually previously thought. And they're showing that reality right now.
Okay, so is this a black cat, white cat thing for you where you don't mind the executive intimidating companies as long as it's yielding an outcome you think is morally
for sure.
right?
I actually, well, I wouldn't say this about Donald Trump because like I said, who knows what, like there's a better way to do this because it's not technically a redistributive policy if you don't redistribute the wealth at all. It is taxes though, right? Like Donald Trump has implemented this broad sales tax, which is a regressive tax. I'm not in favor of it for that reason, but he has been able to implement this and it hasn't even turned into a broad regressive sales tax yet because companies are seemingly not actually increasing the costs in the ways that we thought they would. I think it's still going to happen down the line. It's impossible for them not to, but the very fact that they haven't done so in the interim implies that they did have room for they did have more room to lower their profit rates without taking too significant of a hit. And I think in the best regulatory system, the same intimidation would exist by the state, but in the direction of taking, instead of giving it as an entry tax, taking some of that money and telling the companies to give it back to their workers so that they have more.
What would you want to see Trump spend the additional tax revenue on?
Oof, so many things, but he's just not going to do that. But I mean,
but surely there's a mechanistic thing.
I mean, healthcare, infrastructure, education. There are so many areas of need. I'm not even going to say improvement at this point. Like areas in dire need of resources that they're not getting. Rural hospital networks are completely eviscerated at this point, and it's only slated to get worse with the new triple B bill that he passed through with $800 billion of Medicaid cuts that are going to come after the midterms. That is going to rip apart the existing network of like rural hospitals that rely on Medicaid to serve their patients. Are no longer going to have this financial. They're no longer going to have patients that are able to pay for their hospital bills at all. So it's going to destroy what remains of rural hospital networks in this country. And that's devastating. And I think we should be moving in the opposite direction on that, abolishing the interest of profit from healthcare in its entirety, because it's an inelastic it's an inelastic demand good. So either you need heavy market intervention from the government, or no market intervention whatsoever, no market whatsoever in that process.
Okay, so what about debt? So if I have made any headway, which I'm fearing I have made no headway, if I made any headway, some of that money, or in my universe, virtually all of it, would go to paying down the debt. Mm-hmm. Good allocation, bad allocation.
I don't necessarily care about that at all, because I think that the international financial markets are just dictated by the confidence that people have in American might, in the American economy in general. I don't think it's like tied to anything tangible, like you said. It's not tied to like any sort of commodity. It's not tied to gold, right? So it's
and you don't think the debt can break that confidence?
I think it is virtually impossible for the debt to break that confidence, because in the same way that I was just talking about the stock market, which is like no longer as associated with like the real market fundamentals that we think of, or like an innovative product that we're talking about, and it's more so just like the overwhelming confidence, or the overwhelming need to have endless unlimited growth. The same goes for the international design that we have, where people are just like, we can't break this apart, even when Trump is forcibly trying to break it apart. Look at the design that we have around global trade, right? We built it. We built it in a way where we just give IOUs to other countries, and we could then have them build the products, and then we could just say like, okay, the dollar is the currency that trade is being conducted on. We have complete control over it, and we'll just give you an IOU, and then we'll buy these cheap goods that you are creating over there. So then our consumer base can, enjoy endless treats. Donald Trump is trying to break that apart, or at least by his own admission, he was like actively attempting to disrupt the system for no discernible reason whatsoever. He claims it's because he wants to build a robust manufacturing base and do trade protectionism, but you have to build that base first instead of just like deciding that all of these other vassal states are supposed to pay additional tithing to the American lordship in the way that he has done so far, where he goes to countries and says, you have to buy our chicken, you have to buy our F-150s, and you have to make up for this trade surplus. And in the process, you're supposed to pay us. If he can
actually free up enough dollars to start paying down the debt, great. It would actually be wildly advantageous for the very people that you want to help. But the hard reality is that everybody at this stage in the debt cycle thinks that it goes on forever. And this is when you're literally a small handful of years, I'm going to peg it at roughly 10 years away from, mechanistically, it just can't go on. You're adding $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. And already you spend more in interest on that debt than you spend on national defense. So it's like it eventually becomes bigger than all of your healthcare programs. Then it becomes bigger than all of your healthcare programs put together. And it happens very, very fast. There's no country, that's not true. 98% of every country that's spent any significant amount of time with a debt to GDP ratio of over 130 has ended up in civil war or revolution. So Japan is the only country that has avoided that. Now, Japan has cultural reasons why I think they'd be fine. I'm not even sure we have to go all the way to 130 before we start pulling ourselves apart at the seams. So it's like debt is the thing where I am like banging pots and pans and screaming, trying to get people to hear me. But because it's not emotionally sexy, it doesn't feel like punishing the rich. I cannot get people to wake up to the fact there's one thing driving your problem. It is debt and money printing.
Well, the reason why like I said, the reason why I don't think it's as consequential or as significant is precisely because there's this, it's almost like the red button, right? Once America collapses, the entire system collapses. And therefore, even when
China will be like, peace.
I understand that.
And empires fall all the time.
I know.
When
I think
England fell, America
I think
rose.
the American empire is slated to fall as well. But my point is,
don't you want to stop that?
I want America to be a force for good. It's currently not. I wish it was, but it's just a force for endless, unlimited greed and
when you
death
say
and destruction.
Force for good, is that an international comment or an
both international
economic?
and also domestic?
Okay. And so we talked about the external part. internally domestic? How do we economically become a force for good? Like mechanistically, though, I want to know, like, what are the policies?
We have unlimited wealth in this country. We have
Whoa. Explain that.
I mean, we have tremendous wealth in this country. This is the wealthiest country on the planet in the history of mankind.
Yes, leveraged to the gills with debt.
For sure. But ultimately, we have so much technological innovation. We have an incredible infrastructure that we're relying on, that we made gains on in the New Deal, that we're still basically eating off of, and we haven't necessarily improved it in ways that we could have for a very long time due to that same private-public partnership structure that we've designed, that makes it so that these companies get the benefits, get the subsidies, get the tax cuts, and don't actually deliver anything in return. And the regulatory agencies that are supposed to enforce these companies to follow through. I'll give you the example of like ISPs. In the 90s, they got like billions of dollars of tax cuts because they were supposed to create broadband that was easily accessible. They were supposed to move in the direction of fiber optic cables. I live in West Hollywood. I still don't have fiber. I have worse internet than like Chattanooga, Tennessee. The reason why Chattanooga, Tennessee has better internet than me, living in fucking West Hollywood and paying 50+% in taxes overall year over year, because it's just pure income, is because they had a local government take control over the situation and said, no, we're going to deliver this unconditionally. I don't think that we should leave it up to, private industry.
But you don't look at what Elon is doing and go, like, this is pretty interesting.
In terms of what? Starlink?
Starlink is going to bring high broadband, low latency internet to everybody.
No, I think there are things that Elon Musk companies are doing that are a direct consequence of the brilliant people that work there. And Elon is simply sitting on top of all of these.
I don't need you to cheer for Elon. I'm just saying,
all of this innovation.
That's privatization. That's how you get engineers to get behind you.
Oh, well, what I was going to say is like, it doesn't have to be that, because it's all still, it's heavily reliant on previous technology that was publicly funded. It's like sitting on top of a lot of like NASA's JPL engineers, for example. Like it would not exist without NASA. Like Elon,
listen, I
Starlink.
love the government. Like, if they're going to spend our dollars on things that the private industry isn't going to tackle, but could yield something advantageous, I love that. We are all standing on the shoulders of giants. The question just becomes, what yields the most innovation? And if you look at SOEs, you can literally, so state-owned enterprises, you can literally compare them to privatization and en masse. Not that there won't be examples here and there where SOEs somehow pull something off, but en masse, privatization just always becomes more efficient, more innovative, because humans don't want to work for free. And so they need that incentive. It's like, when I talk to people that lean socialists, it's like they really get the need for workers to have dignity and to make enough money that they can exist in the economy, and that they can make the promise to themselves and to their kids, my kids' lives will be better than mine, but my life next year is going to be better than my life today. Like, that's so important, and we have to facilitate that. But I'm saying they get that, but then when they translate it to what system yields that, and it's letting those people go, for instance, Elon Musk is a moron. I want to spin off my own company. I want to do this myself. I'm going to outsmart him. I'm going to show the world. And enough people do that they end up creating something extraordinary.
Well, like you said, there's also natural barriers of entry into, space travel and commercial airline industries as well. So then there is that problem in terms of industries that tend to monopolize. I mean, every single industry wants to do that.
Breaking a monopoly is very important.
And that's another regulatory function of the state as well. It's just it seems like it's a matter of like how much state intervention we want in this process.
How much state intervention works. This is the thing. Like, watching you, you're a big supporter of Mom Donnie. Yeah. And bro, like, I'm like, hey, he really seems like he has a good heart and he wants to do something rad. And I'm just like, go look at what happened in the Bronx when they tried rent control before.
Well, he's not even proposing rent control. He's saying rent freezes on rent stabilized units because that is an independent commission that is like appointed by the mayor.
Literally, and it is part of what happened in the Bronx.
No, I know, but I'm saying that has actually happened in the past on numerous occasions, yes, and it hasn't led to
catastrophe.
I don't
literal catastrophe. You have to like go do like a breakdown of what happened in the 70s and 80s in the Bronx, it's wild.
Well, I think rent stabilized housing, having rent freezes. Rent freeze means like increase in rent. Has been successfully implemented even during COVID and whatnot as well. So it's not
maybe in like the world's most hyper, like right in this moment for 18 months or something.
Yeah.
But the costs of maintaining the building are going to go up. This is inflation. This is why I'm saying once people stop understanding inflation, they fuck themselves 6 ways to Sunday, because all the plumbing is going to go up at the rate of inflation, right? So if I'm a building owner and I've got to deal with plumbing issues, and I know since 2020, we've gone up by 25%, conservative estimates, that's from Trueflation. So you've got an increase in 25%, but if I'm the landlord, I can't up my rents. So that's just one of the many things that could go wrong. And so now all of a sudden you're putting the business owner in a position, and the building is a business, and I get why you don't like that, but it's like, hey, I took all the capital risk and all that to build this business. I have to keep the ongoing stuff. This is why now people will actually advise people don't own, because there's so many costs with owning. But the landlord has to like upkeep that building. Now, as you force them into leaner and leaner margins through freezing rent, what you end up doing is changing their cost structure. And now they're like, okay, well then I have to cut back on servicing the building. And then it got so bad.
I think in many instances these buildings are not being properly serviced to begin with, and regardless, rent still keeps going up.
Greed.
I think it's greed for sure.
So
100%.
Can we agree that deregulating and letting people build more housing is at a minimum part of the solution, even if it's not the whole solution?
I think building more housing is definitely part of the solution.
But you want the government to be in control of that.
I want, in my estimation, and what I have seen is methods that are successful. I think the government already has tremendous power in this country and in all countries, and using that power for good in terms of even like eminent domain and like expansive public infrastructure projects, which include like public housing, would be a necessary intervention in the market that is currently dominated by endless greed. And every type of regulation is actually used as a loophole for people to continue protecting their speculative assets, housing.
All right. Brother, I know I have to get you out of here as you need to go live.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for your time, man. Where can people follow along with you?
I'm live every day at twitch.tv/Hasanabi. And I'm on Twitter at Hasan the Hun, and on TikTok and Instagram at Hasan D. Piker.
And when he says every day, he means every day is wild. All right, everybody, if you have not already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more.
By definition, the American government's job is to protect the government of the United States, not the people of the United States. Government employees, by and large, are not your sharpest, smartest, most motivated, most dedicated employee.
Help. What